Hur normal måste man vara för att anses vara normal? Och vilken värld är den riktiga? Den vi alla har i vårt huvud eller den som finns runt omkring oss? För en person som har Aspergers syndrom, som är en form av autism, så är det inte alltid enkelt att göra de här skillnaderna. Om en timme kan ni träffa en av dem, Tommy, som själv berättar om den stora katastrofen. Nu ska Dokument Utifrån visa den andra av 3 delar av kriget om Kosovo. Den tredje och sista delen ser ni nästa vecka, samma tid.
Kriget om Kosovo skulle ju avgöras bara genom flygbombningar, det hade NATO beslutat. Tyskland kunde till exempel på inga villkor gå med i ett krig som innebar att marktrupper skulle sättas in, och USAs president vågade inte utmana den amerikanska opinionen med en konflikt som kunde leda till att amerikanska soldater skulle dö. Problemet var bara att bomberna inte verkade påverka Milosevic Jugoslavien på det sätt som man hoppats. Kosovo-provinsen föröddes av bombningar och av den jugoslaviska arméns härjningar. En enorm flyktingvåg sökte sig bort från städerna där, många till grannlandet Makedonien. Men Milosevic tycktes inte påverkas. Och i efterhand så har det också visat sig att NATOs bomber alltför sällan träffade riktiga mål. Att det istället var listigt hopkomna skenmål man bombade. Och vissa bomber föll dessutom helt fel över flyktingar på traktorsläp, och världsopinionen rasade. Om bombkriget som inte tycktes fungera handlade det andra programmet i vår serie om kriget om Kosovo.
Natten den 24 mars 1999 gick NATO ut i krig för första gången i sin historia. Den nederländske piloten som eskorterade bombplanen var en av de första som fick stridskontrakt. Han spårade ut mål och konstaterade att det var ett fientligt plan.
And we were clear to engage. So after about 5 minutes, I got shot. This when it a bright flash. I looked over my left shoulder. I saw debris flying from a burning aircraft.
NATOs krig mot ett litet fattigt land hade börjat. Hans ledare hade gett sig in på ett oerhört vågspel.
It was unclear as to exactly how Milosevic might react. And I felt, as I always do, if our armed forces are engaged in any form of action, you feel a very great sense of responsibility and a great sense of apprehension.
Militärt blev det en osäker start för världens mäktigaste krigsmaskin. Politikerna hade inte lyssnat på de högsta militära cheferna.
We started out in a way we would not have chosen to start out as professional soldiers, as professional airmen. Again, wanting to go for the head of the snake on the first night, not being able to do that.
Det som skulle ha blivit en promenadseger blev en mardröm som skulle sätta punkt för det 20:e århundradet. Det tyngsta lasset i offensiven skulle dras av det amerikanska bombflyget.
I was looking outside because it was quiet, and to me that meant danger, danger. That's when I first started seeing enemy AAA coming up. The hair started rising on the back of your neck. You could kind of feel this is getting serious now. I hit the pickle button and stared essentially at my TV screen. It's kind of a surreal feeling. You see this thing blow up in your screen, but you don't hear it. The big flash. And you smile. I mean, you did what you were trained to do.
You've got the gas to go back to the original target one more way.
Det här var egentligen ett spel för gallerierna. Den första nattens anfall hade aviserats så väl att det inte åstadkom några större skador.
By this time, Serb forces had left most of the targets that we were striking that night. They had, over the prior weeks, we had watched them field deploy most of their forces. Cantonment sites, the garrison sites were largely vacant. Really now we're sending a political message about our determination to carry through with this air campaign.
Det handlade verkligen om politik. 1941 hade 18 000 människor dödats i ett tyskt blixtanfall mot Belgrad. Nu bombade NATO inte stadens centrum utan gjorde mycket väsen för att försöka få Slobodan Milosevic till förhandlingsbordet.
There were people who had worked with the man for decades and who knew him far better than I that opined that all he's looking for is an excuse, a show of force, a token confrontation of 3 or 4 days so that he can withdraw with honor and it'll all be over.
Den godkända planen omfattade bara 90 strategiskt betydelselösa mål, vilket retade generalen som skulle leda anfallet. Han ville slå hårt mot Milosevic för att det skulle ta skruv.
Our recommendation was to go after what we believe to be the strategic target set in Belgrade. I don't want to go to some young man's wife and explain that her husband died sending a signal. If I'm going to make that trip, if I'm going to write that letter, I want to look her in the eye and say, young lady, your husband was packing the Sunday punch. He was part of the best we had. We were going for the jugular.
Männen i uniform var rasande. Utrikesministern blev uppringd av presidenten.
He called around 12:30 and we talked about the fact that the bombing had begun and we both went over with each other all the different things that we had tried to do. He said, I think about this all the time. So we kind of did an inventory of all the things that we had done and assured ourselves that this was the only way that we could bring about the result that we needed.
Den kvällen satte serberna eld på den gamla stadskärnan i Đakovo, vilket blev början på ett långt skräckvälde i staden. De här bilderna togs av en Kosovo-alban som höll sig gömd. En familj som skulle drabbas hårt av terrorn i Đakovo berättar.
I feel fear inside. We stay in houses and we know that the killing, we know for killing because we hear the shots, we hear screaming of people.
Masoj ka qenë dhomën tjetër të flejt, është i jatë sop. Veç është ullën të avullin shtu. Edhe me njëherë kanë fillu mi gjujt. Me pushk. Kondakat pushkës. Edhe me boz të plinit. Me njëherë kanë ërcu në tokë.
They start beating my father, telling him, you want NATO, here is NATO, I'm the NATO for you. And they beat him for death. We can only hear him, that noise before death. I can't forget that smell, the smell of drugs, drinks, blood. I still can't forget.
Innan serberna gav sig av satte de eld på familjens hus där den döende fadern låg kvar.
Jag minns så på det kom till att du kom med blod på i skat i deg. Trodde på just det. Det är ett frymärke. Jag kom med grej. Fadin och kom kapi flaka lån vid bishin på Sipri. Jo ma afro dejte Missade, s'ku mujt m'ingrej ma te pra kum kap një kulicë të përllokit, e kum qidi burin aty dhe jam dalën rrugë.
Terrorn i Đakovo fortsatte i flera veckor. Serbiska soldater och polisförband återkom gång på gång och dödade hundratals kosovoalbaner. I Belgrad slöt människorna upp bakom sin ledare. Nattens nålsticksbombningar hade bara gjort dem trotsigare.
Ovdje nije bilo u pitanju samo Kosovo.
Nu spelade det ingen roll vad man tyckte om den politik som Milosevic tidigare hade fört i Kosovo. Det som i väst betraktades som ett brutalt mördande sågs av de flesta serber som en bisak i kampen för nationens överlevnad. Det brittiska flygvapnets lilla kontingent av Harrier-plan hade inte träffat några mål den första natten. Men den andra natten kunde piloterna med sina laserstyrda bomber ägna sig åt ett dödsbringande videospel. Major Chris Huckstep var den första som kopplade upp sig.
As you're running in, I remember it was a starlit night. You could see the snow on the mountains. It was beautifully clear. Halfway to our target, bombs began going off in other packages, targets.
Huckstep släppte sina bomber och satte sig i säkerhet.
And when it was getting near, I put the aircraft over to look down into the target area. It was pretty black down there. And then, exactly when I expected it, there was this huge explosion. A tremendous great flash of flame and red explosion. And it was an ammunition storage dump that we were hitting.
När filmerna spelades upp i TV:s kvällsnyheter tycktes allt ha gått enligt planen. Men politikerna hade varit så säkra på att Milosevic skulle vädja om fred att man efter 3 dagar inte hade några godkända bombmål kvar.
We kept flying. Day 3 came along. The flying was going fine. We still had target sets, but we really didn't have a good plan for night 4, night 5. And as the beginning of day 3 happened, we started asking, okay, what are we going to do now? We've hit just about everything we're targeted against.
I do remember on the third night canceling the second wave of 117s because we were out of targets. Of the 91 that we had been given, we had struck that target set.
Och det fanns en anledning till det. NATOs överbefälhavare Wesley Clark visste att den europeiska opinionen inte skulle godta Shorts planer på att bomba Belgrad sönder och samman.
In Europe, there's a terrible aftermath of World War II, quite understandably. And nations and individuals have memories of the terror of bombing and what it does to civilian populations. And I think European leaders were acutely aware of the sensitivity of their publics, their electorate, their leadership to the dangers of unrestricted aerial warfare. We had to convince them of the validity of the targets, the accuracy of the delivery systems, the skill and courage of the airmen, their ability to deliver weapons with pinpoint accuracy.
We fought this conflict incrementally for all sorts of reasons, and we all understand that, holding the alliance together. Certainly the belief that many of our leaders had going into this conflict, that Milosevic only needed, quote, a couple of nights of bombing, unquote, and then he would accept NATO terms. I am not personally convinced that all of our leaders had come to grips with the possibility of a prolonged air campaign, that they generally thought that all NATO had to do was, again, and I'm quoting, demonstrate resolve.
Medan flygledningen tryckte på för att få fler mål började den serbiska markoffensiven ta fart.
The Serb forces had really begun their operation against the Kosovar Albanians across Kosovo. We saw these large-scale operations now going on against the civil populace with the police and also now with army forces very involved.
De flesta som utförde den etniska rensningen har försvunnit ur sikte. Men teamet hittade en man som berättade om serbernas metoder. De var effektiva och brutala och hade finslipats under 8 års krig på Balkan.
Takozvanu potkovicu, to je sistem ratovanja koji se primjenjivao na svim ovim ratištima u bivšoj Jugoslaviji, ta potkovica. Jednostavno ta potkovica je služila da se selo maltene opkoli sa 3 strane, a ta 4. strana bi ostala slobodna da bi civili mogli da. Kriterijum, na primjer, kada bi uhvatili mladog Albanca, Znači, od 18, 19, 20, do 25 godina. Stav je bio takav da je on pripadnik UČK. Iako on možda nikada veze nije imao sa njima, ali takav je stav bio. Svi bi ga pogledali i rekli, o, ti si mlad, ti si zdrav, ti možda držiš pušku i da nosiš oružje, možeš da ubijaš na Srbe.
I en operation omringades byn Ispica av serbisk militär och polis. Männen föste samman på en plats.
One deur stika deur me naprej. Sa se kreće ni pred sad. Per kurban du nam ju bon sad per fest bajramit. Brime per skomta što smija nae. Koordinationen kom. Ma på djorden dör i besen i maten, djorden i maten, snus i mir. Sa kö, sa seljuka, sa ei hol, sa si paaptest. Sa vete, vesi, vete pastrei, vete moti, vete kreit. Sa veskuren diri automatin, pe kroi trakjast in i fysikon, sa ono sa stas broj, sa med djordik to, sa det tu, sa tjö djorden, sa det derzöte bora.
Kosovos befrielsearmé, UCK, med sina numerärt underlägsna styrkor kunde bara se på.
Våra till kan då dygruppe. Nygruppe kan då kan köpa per en dime. Dessa grupper nu måste kriterier kan köpa i linje. Gruppen per linje kan köpa till Ara Saraceles. Den det köpa till Ara Saraceles. Och ty kan nå pack para sig med in på målet. Jag kan nå sätt kväll. Efter betyder. Och jag så gott i mina kan där.
Som genom ett under var det en handfull män som överlevde.
Och när kan tjua till allt. Och kan des med exekutor. När kan ha ordnen mot krypetyne eller nakhyre. Eller kan bli exekutiven. Hon är ju så. Kom när jag till Zedda kika. Och kom på zoom om leverit. Det är kom het år sin dier först. Men vad håller med spia traktorer och tesar och neserker och kreit och levada sig. Tanim tjusag em himmal.
Eilen chicken botu chicken massakruwe. Merem zoi vesse kom per be djalen kom kom dit kom sån merem ljuka väster södern här djalen dikon.
143 människor uppges ha dött i massakern. En tid efter begravningen kom serberna tillbaka, grävde upp kropparna och flyttade dem till en annan plats. Gravarna i Ispica är tomma. Nu kom det dramatiska bilder från NATO-planens kameror. Från bombkrigets fjärde dag syntes en strid ström av flyktingar som var på väg mot gränsen.
Okay, Ripple? Yeah.
Some of the pilots told me when we were flying over Kosovo, we saw the flames coming out, the houses being burned, and then we returned to the base and we watched the television and we saw the faces of the people who were being driven out of Kosovo. And they put the two images together, the one from the plane, the house being burned, and later on in the day, the face of the people who had been expelled out of the house.
Bara några dagar efter bombkrigets början var drygt 500 000 kosovoalbaner på flykt mot grannländerna. Det var en tragisk paradox. NATO hade gått ut i krig för att skydda dem, men nu var läget värre än någonsin tidigare.
I did feel to a certain extent responsible also because I was a member of the European community and that was taking place in front of our eyes in Europe. Things that my generation thought and never again would see that.
Kriget hade pågått i 4 dagar. Milosevic var inte skakad. Men det var NATO. En amerikansk stealthbombare hade skjutits ned. När den serbiska televisionen tog sina bilder låg piloten som hade skjutit ut sig med katapult gömd i ett dike 200 meter bort. Amerikanska specialförband gav sig ut för att rädda honom.
And the contract we have, the contract that keeps young men going after the target said is, we're going to come and get you. No matter where you are, we're going to come and get you. We had communications relayed through airborne command and control. And of course the pilot a couple times asked for decisions. Decisions only I could make. Hey boss, the weather's going down and the Serbs are closing in. Can we go in and get them? You bet.
Och det gjorde de.
I believe the call was Eagle on board, which meant that the kid was in a helicopter. And, that's a moment I'll never forget.
Den helgen antog flyktingströmmen rent bibliska proportioner. Även om Milosevic hade flaggat för att han tänkte fördriva albanerna så chockades både politiker och allmänhet av operationens omfattning. Med facit i hand kan man kanske säga att det var Milosevics avgörande misstag.
It was an appalling thing to do to people. I mean, had there been any doubt, as there wasn't, but had there been any doubt in my mind up to that point, it would have been removed at that point. That was precisely, that was the moment of test for us, that we then had to say, my goodness, no, we're going to see this thing through.
Trots att motivet var rätt så gjorde NATO fel. Alliansen började jaga de förband som utförde den etniska rensningen. Flyget dirigerades om från strategiska mål till serbiska arméförband i Kosovo.
It was very important politically, it was very important militarily. These forces, after all, were the cause of the problem. They were the agent of the ethnic cleansing. They were the support for the ethnic cleansing.
Politiskt var det kanske motiverat, men Klaus Naumann, tysken som ledde NATOs högsta militära organ, tyckte att den nya linjen var tokig.
I said I think at 2 or 3 occasions in the council that they are asking for the impossible. They want us to stop let's say, the individual murderer going with his knife from village to village and carving up some Kosovars that you cannot do from the air. You cannot hit this guy. You have to be in to stop him.
Och mannen som ledde bombkriget ansåg att den nya taktiken bara skulle förlänga kriget.
I believe there was a great sigh of relief in Belgrade. I just didn't think it was the way to use my assets, and I didn't think it was going to get us to where we wanted to get to, which is have Milosevic modify his activity and stop ethnic cleansing. And we felt that we were going to spend a lot of assets to get minimum return. It was going to take a lot of sorties to kill a tank. And there was enormous risk of hitting the wrong target because we knew refugees would be moving around in this ethnic cleansing environment.
Förbrytarjakt med högteknologiska hjälpmedel var oerhört svårt. Spaningsflyg skickades in för att söka upp målen ungefär som flygarresan under första världskriget. Och sen fick de vägleda bombflyget som skulle sätta in stöt.
I said, okay, let's imagine you're in a car and I'm telling them this on the radio. I want you to drive the car up until you get to the warehouse that's green on the left, and I want you to turn left there. And I want you to take that up and you're going to go past 2 houses on the right, a blue one and a pink one. When you get the pink house, I want you to turn right. I want you to go down that road until you see the fort. And he's telling me all the time on the radio, yeah, I see that, yeah, I see that.
Found the target, happy with that. I can see the little tiny vehicles that we're talking about. And then I run outbound to set up for the attack. The American calls, hold it, was that effect. There's a civilian bus that's pulled up next to them.
Well, the Serbs put their forces in villages, under bridges, in towns, anywhere near human refugee-type habitation. So it would make it difficult for us to go and attack them. Anywhere the refugees could be, they put forces and hide them away. So first thing, the problem was finding them, first of all, and then second thing is making sure there are no refugees around. And if there's any doubt, there was no doubt, don't drop.
Air power can do an awful lot, but it's never going to stop the ability of a guy on the ground of taking a can of gasoline and a match and lighting a house on fire, or lining a group of civilians up against a wall and shooting them.
Our thought process was, just to simplify it, if I have 10 sorties to spend, I will impact Milosevic more if I send those 10 sorties to Belgrade than if I send those same 10 sorties into Kosovo, perhaps find a tank, perhaps not, but the impact on ethnic cleansing, 0.
Serberna hade enklare metoder när de oskadliggjorde soldater. En helg besköts 3 unga amerikanska soldater vid den makedonska gränsen. De kallade på hjälp, men när hjälpen kom fram var soldaterna borta. Spaning i stor skala sattes igång, men för sent. De hade blivit tillfångatagna.
They rushed at us and immediately threw us down and began stripping away our equipment. I know I was receiving many blows from rifle butts and kicks.
Immediately after they pulled us out and roughed us up and took us back into the village, we were all placed on our knees, the three of us with our hands behind our head, where they put a rifle to the back of my head. So obviously my reaction was this was a classic execution position. So I really believed that was going to be the end.
You know, I looked to my left, I could see Gonzalez on the floor or on his knees. I looked to my right, I could see Stone, I could see him, you know. I could see him, he seemed like he was praying. You know, and myself too, in my head, I'm doing the same thing.
It was enough time for me to contemplate maybe that my life was probably about to end. But even worse than that, I think, was before my life ended, I thought I was going to see actually both of the other guys die first.
Lyckligtvis inte. För Milosevic var amerikanerna mer värda levande än döda. Vem visste hur många fler soldater som skulle bli tillfångatagna och kanske dödade? Och hur många plan som skulle bli nedskjutna? För NATO gick ingenting som det skulle. Men nu närmade sig en vändpunkt.
It was time to go into the next ratcheting up of the intensity of the air campaign. We had to take the targets in downtown Belgrade under attack, and that means, since none of us knew what Milosevic's threshold for pain would be, it meant doing as much damage to the assets he valued as rapidly as possible.
De nya målen måste godkännas av regeringarna i NATOs 19 medlemsstater. Generalsekreterare Solana visste att bombanfall mot Belgrad var en känslig fråga.
Belgrade is a city of Europe, and you cannot launch a military campaign without the support and the understanding of the people that support the governments who take that decision.
Något formellt beslut fattades aldrig, men när USA tryckte på fick Solana befogenhet att utöka antalet mål.
I think in this phase, the Secretary General was very courageous and took a lot of risk and said, based on military advice, I believe it's necessary to do this. He informed the Council, told them, this is my decision, and I take it that you can go along, and this is still within the authority you have given to me.
När kriget hade pågått i 10 dagar blev centrala Belgrad ett förstahandsmål. Det var så generalerna ville ha det, men de insåg att det fanns risker.
General Clark asked us, the Secretary General and myself, to authorize a strike against the police headquarters and the Minister of the Interior in downtown Belgrade. When we saw that some 500 or 600 meters away from the Serb Ministry of the Interior, there's a hospital in Belgrade. And when we saw this, I said to Solana, if we hit by sheer accident this hospital, then the war is over.
Till sist gav NATOs högteknologi och avancerade krigsmateriel resultat. Bomberna träffade sina mål med förödande precision och byggnader över hela Belgrad slogs ut. Då började vissa inom alliansen bli oroliga. Frankrike gick i spetsen för de som befarade att tusentals civila kunde bli dödade. Solana fick mindre handlingsfrihet och för militären blev det rena mardrömmen att få målen godkända.
To convince the capitals of contentious targets, we probably ran a 50%, I probably ran about a 50% success rate of explaining to them why this target was militarily significant, why it could be struck with a minimum risk of unintended collateral or unintended civilian casualties.
There were numerous occasions where airplanes were airborne, and a senior national rep would run into me and say, our parliament won't allow us to strike that target. Or our authorities will not allow your airplanes, which took off from our soil, to strike that target.
Our plan was to escalate as rapidly as possible, to do as much as we could, but we also recognized that no single target, no set of targets, no bombing series was more important than maintaining the consensus of NATO.
Men för Short var det just behovet att bevara enigheten mellan 19 olika nationer som satte hämsko på hela planen. Om ändå de hårda pojkarna från Pentagon hade fått sköta allt själva.
Let me shoot very straight with you. I believe before the first bomb was dropped that the door should have been closed with all those who wished to go to war. And the United States should have said very clearly, it appears NATO wants to go to war in the air, and in the air only. If that is the case, and that is the sentiment of the nations here, we will lead you to war. We, the United States, will provide the leadership, the enabling force, the majority of the striking power, the technology required. We will take the alliance to war, and we will win this thing for you. But the price to be paid is, we call the tune.
En uppretad general Short var flera gånger på väg att avgå, men övertalades av kollegorna att stanna.
The saving grace in this entire thing was the professionalism and the commitment and the courage of the young men and women flying the airplanes. And I felt the best contribution I could make was to keep doing my job as best I could, to continue to try to advocate what I thought was the right way to do business, to take care of the kids as best I could.
Men fick killarna och tjejerna Milosevic att ge sig? Uppenbarligen inte.
When did Mike Short realize we were in for the long haul? I'm going to say after the first strikes on Belgrade. And you saw parts of Belgrade in flames, and Milosevic wasn't even talking to us.
Milosevic vägrade att förhandla. NATO hade ingen seger i sikte och invånarna i Belgrad fortsatte att trotsa NATO. Kriget hade pågått i 11 dagar och världen började vänja sig vid bilder som Europa inte hade sett på 50 år.
It reminded me a lot to everything we've heard about the Second World War. It was an ambience of fear, basically. And then they would just load them literally like animals, because everybody wanted to be on the first train because nobody knew whether it was going to be a second one.
Men de som kom med tågen var lyckligt lottade. Visst var det eländigt, men de hade livet i behåll. I städer som Đakovo fortsatte terrorn. Familjer kurade ihop sig tillsammans medan serbisk polis och militär härjade i stan, brände, plundrade och dödade.
Kerry Bard det var den skyldigheten när Junskam en chimon att choose politia utsiden matematen kar eller kallan karen och tar chupiknisa hade tiger spela jag sa jag så hink då där när stunden spel Roma tog på att sillen to möt på svolja hade kommit en man svolja. ونبونا كشيم سيديكن بس نأتو لرقون تا جوت الماتماتا تنمتن بس نبدولا ونم شايفة با دور ما هيني هزبونا زور بس دولا نيجا منطر نبوغل دفيشة تكو أثر أبي مرة يو بس كمويت الدور لغوث سمجا ميت يشكون ريتارات دسلولا تجيل مرة فريما سيجا
Tioårige Dren lyckades fly till sina farföräldrar när hemmet sattes i brand. Kvar blev 18 döda, däribland hans mor och 3 småsystrar. Nästan hela den kosovoalbanska befolkningen flydde undan terrorn på smala, leriga stigar över bergen. Milosevic lät sig inte rubbas. Alltihop var NATOs fel.
There are a lot of refugees, but they are result of bombing. And they are not only Albanians. Everybody is running away because of bombing. Serbs, Turks, Gypsy, Muslims. Of course, Albanians, their number is biggest.
Flyktingarna var ett väldigt problem för NATO. Hundratusentals människor behövde mat och tak över huvudet. Och deras lidanden gav ökad styrka åt påståendet att NATOs aktioner drabbade dem som man lovat att skydda.
I think the ethnic cleansing and the expulsion was not triggered by NATO. It may have been accelerated by NATO, and definitely some of the atrocities which happened, I think were caused by NATO bombs, since this was simply this vendetta feeling which is prevailing in the Balkans anyway, and they saw that their compatriots were bombed, they saw that Belgrade was bombed, so they took revenge with these people who could not defend themselves.
Flyktingströmmen ökade, liksom riskerna med NATOs nya taktik att slå till mot de serbiska marktrupperna. Planen var ju högt uppe i luften och skulle försöka förstå vad som hände på marken. I närheten av Đakovo upptäckte NATO-piloter något som de trodde var en serbisk militärtransport. De fick tillstånd att anfalla.
Pak varten tas vedi para precis 200 metra vi uzbeštaženit. Znaš tako da mašom, a ti ko se ljuma sporin traktor to. Ja štedi se mi konti por cijela mešice. Kolika boja granat. Čas je di sa skim kumćen šumi rulo se mi kapasnija šumate. Već krumkanje u štim. On branschen. Nej. Jag passat med att ramka ut på man på prokolis traktorer. Jag tog mig ner vid den så kom upp. Att moment vi kom på ner så på Lubar så skulle du ut på Leon.
Te post i vidier medial por kompakt jale. Se dali skorog. Oj neon ka bo, neon ska bo. Just då. Ska jag. Sytkret. Griden ja. Jag spun. To, tagar lani ska jag göra det. Det är det ska ha en hesen jag det har på medial.
Omkring 70 Kosovo-albaner dog vid det tillfället.
Forskoj. Ska man på. Och tack då grazie när jag traktor så fick traktor står ju med då annars fall his jämil och kikakt idealit testes vet näsfall är ja. Back kutjal tesonspital chatnatisjon det. Alla dagar så ja. Då kiken jag vågar teken att jag facket. Det är inte tråkigt det. Det tar kika hem det är så. Toana fänak maina hait tat konjatit. Koska kommet koska. Konjatin charto boren mo stes.
NATO koska. As Michael kusata. Taj pilot Sika gjujtë që i ka pas faj, që nuk i përfshirë në gjithë, për qaj si ka gjujtë.
Den ohyggliga nyheten kom snabbt ut i världspressen. NATO hade fått ännu en kris att hantera.
What happened is a journalist in Belgrade phoned me up and simply warned me
that they've been invited to get on a bus and go down to Jakovica to film a NATO bombing of a convoy. And what I did, of course, is immediately get on the channels and try to find out what had gone on. But, you know, in this type of operations, you know, air sorties are taking place all the time. The pilots are not yet back, you know, they haven't yet been debriefed. The gun camera footage hasn't yet been analysed, so you don't get an immediate reaction.
Några timmar senare fick Shay se bilder från ett stridsplan som träffade ett militärt mål, så han förnekade att NATO hade beskjutit konvojen.
So first result is we've looked at it. It was north of Jakovica. It was a bona fide military target. Therefore, we don't have to accept responsibility. A couple of hours later, media were telling me that the place that they had visited, where they had filmed the tractor, the bodies, seen the bomb craters, was south of Jakovica.
Absolutely impossible to believe.
Pressen krävde klara besked, men allt Shay kunde säga var att han skulle undersöka saken.
Told you what we know, and we don't know anything more for the time being. So, you know, this terrible feeling of deflation and depression when the first euphoria of it's not us fades, and you obviously know that you're going to have to start the investigation all over again.
But what we ended up doing is, over a period of 4 days, we ended up going back to the airmen who flew and then taking all the TV footage and all of the gun sight imagery, all of the through gun sight video that we had, putting it all together and laying out exactly what happened.
They identified what turned out to be tractors pulling trailers as military vehicles. They saw these vehicles moving from house to house, setting houses on fire, and they struck what they thought were trucks. And very honest with you, the first time and the second time I looked at the film, boy, it looked like a truck, because here was what looked like the cab and then the body of a truck. Then when you looked at it a third and a fourth time, yeah, it was a tractor pulling a wagon.
We then had a difficult internal debate, which was, should we own up and present the facts, or should we basically ride out the storm and move on? I argued that we should establish the facts.
It appears possible the vehicles are tractors, are tractor-type vehicles. As I reviewed the tapes with the pilots, they agreed. However, they were emphatic that from the attack altitude to the naked eye, they appeared to be military vehicles.
Politically, it was damaging without any doubt. It was difficult to maintain the cohesion of the alliance under these circumstances, since nations were angry. But I think we have to tell them we try to avoid collateral damage. Yes, we do, and we do successfully, but we cannot avoid it by 100%.
I did not for one instant feel that those events meant that the action was wrong, because I'm afraid this is what happens, and the reason why I tried so hard to bring about a peaceful negotiated settlement is that if you start military action, people die. I mean, that's what happens in wars, and the innocent die as well as the guilty, and you hope there's more of the latter than the former, but that is what happens.
Men allmänheten förstår inte alltid krigets verklighet. PR-insatserna måste ses över.
I was in the office very late one night. The phone went, and it was an old NATO colleague of mine who had gone to the National Security Council in Washington, and he said, Jamie, I need to tip you off. I've just listened in on a phone call between President Clinton and Prime Minister Blair, you know, they think that the information policy has got to be toughened up. It's got to be improved, and they're going to send you reinforcements, that you need help, and your life is about to change.
Det var risk för att Milosevic skulle vinna PR-kriget om inget annat. Blairs pressekreterare Alistair Campbell skulle modernisera NATOs nyhetsmaskineri i Bryssel.
Prime Minister, thank you so much for coming.
When you fight an action like this in modern politics, in our modern media world, you're fighting it on television. You know, it's an extraordinary thing. But if you'd look back at any military action in history, the idea that you didn't have things happen that shouldn't have meant to have happened, or errors of this sort or mistakes of that sort. I think what is a small miracle is that there were so few of them. And of course, it was a frustration to us too, which is the second point, is that Milosevic in a sense had charge of the media agenda.
Nu var det bara en vecka kvar till NATOs 50-årsjubileum. General Clark samlade sina främsta medarbetare. Han ville vara säker på att när alliansens ledare möttes i Washington så skulle han ha fria händer även för att planera ett markkrig.
Both Solana and I were of the opinion we cannot get it within a week's time. It's impossible at the NATO summit to get the decision on something as controversial as the ground forces issue with 7 days preparation time. That's simply impossible in a coalition of 19 nations.
It was very delicate, yes, because many countries were not prepared at that time to approve a military invasion, or military activity. But I thought, and I think that it was right, that we had to have everything planned just in case.
What we can do is to make them aware of what it would mean to go for ground forces, how much time it would take us, and what it would mean in terms of deployment and stability of the other countries.
Det handlade inte bara om att få motsträviga europeer att förbereda ett markkrig. När festligheterna i Washington närmade sig var den amerikanska regeringen precis lika nervös.
Given the fact that we had a lack of enthusiasm for even a peacekeeping mission in Kosovo, then it became very clear to me that it was going to be a very hard sell, if not impossible, to persuade the American people that we were going to put up 150,000 or 200,000 American troops to go in on the ground.
Men för Blair var markkriget viktigt. Före den stora begivenheten träffades han och Clinton privat.
Well, it wasn't that I had a message, but I mean I had a view, but which I think coincided really with the president's view, which was that we started it and we had to see it through and finish it.
I think that these two leaders of Great Britain and the United States looked at each other after a long conversation and said, "We will not lose. Whatever it takes, we will not lose." And that was taken into the meetings at NATO, and in the NATO meetings the next 2 days.
Men generalerna hade ont om tid. Om det skulle bli något markkrig måste planeringen börja direkt.
We told them how much time it would take us to deploy the forces, how many forces we may need, how many countries we need to involve in terms of supporting us by giving us access, basing rights and all this stuff.
Den tyska regeringen hade genast invändningar. Att skicka marktrupp till Kosovo kom inte på fråga.
Germany would not have taken part in a ground war. This was no option. We would have had no support whatsoever in the German parliament. And when I talk about the German parliament, I mean from the extreme left in the parliament to the parties on the middle and on the right.
The only time I would have been really agitated is if, although this didn't happen, people had said, let's remove that option from the table, because I thought that would have sent all the wrong signals to Milosevic. He had to know that we were prepared to do whatever it took to win, and we had to be prepared.
Toppmötet undvek frågan. NATO beslutade inte att börja markkrig, men inte heller motsatsen. Den klassiska frasen "alla möjligheter står öppna" räckte för att Clark skulle gå vidare med planeringen. Under tiden skulle flygkriget utökas och kanske gå bättre.